The parade ground was silent except for the heavy thud of boots striking the dirt. 500 soldiers stood at attention, the sun beating down on their backs, their uniforms drenched in sweat. Among them was a woman, her presence barely acknowledged by most of the men around her. She wasn't just a soldier, she was a fighter, someone who had clawed her way into a world that still looked at her like she didn't belong. But on that day, as eyes turned toward her, no one could imagine how quickly the silence would break, or how unforgettable the moment would become. Stay with me, because this story isn't about strength alone. It's about courage, defiance, and the cost of respect when you're forced to stand your ground. Her name was Captain Emily Carter. She had spent 10 years proving herself in the Army, but still, whispers followed her everywhere she went. She's not strong enough. She's only here because of quotas. She'll crack under real pressure. Those words became the background noise of her life. She swallowed them down like bitter medicine and pushed forward because Emily wasn't chasing acceptance. She was chasing excellence. And still, no matter how many times she earned medals or outperformed her peers, there were men who couldn't bear to see her shine. That morning, one of those men stood in front of her, the colonel himself, and he had a lesson he wanted to teach. But he never expected she would turn the lesson back on him. The colonel was a towering man with a reputation for breaking soldiers before the battlefield ever could. He believed in humiliation as discipline, in fear as control. When he paced, the line of troops' eyes followed nervously, waiting for his next target. But when his boots stopped in front of Emily, a different energy spread through the crowd. The soldiers knew this was about to be more than an inspection. It was about power, pride, and whether one woman could withstand the fury of a man determined to put her in her place. What came next would be burned into their memories forever. Emily stood still, eyes forward, heart pounding. She felt his presence hovering, felt the weight of his stare burning against her skin. The colonel's voice was sharp, cutting through the silence. "You think you're a soldier, Captain Carter? You think you belong here with men who've bled for this country?" His words weren't just questions. They were daggers meant to pierce her confidence in front of 500 witnesses. She wanted to stay calm, but she could feel the sting of humiliation already curling around her chest. Yet she refused to bow her head. She refused to let him win with words alone. The colonel smirked, and then, in one sudden, shocking movement, he lifted his leg and tried to kick her down in front of the entire battalion. Gasps spread like wildfire. No one had expected him to go that far. Time seemed to slow in that moment, the air thick with disbelief. But Emily's instincts were faster than thought, faster than fear. She sidestepped, caught his leg with a twist, and with one decisive movement, one born from years of relentless training, she snapped his balance. The sound of his bone cracking echoed across the ground like a gunshot. The colonel fell, screaming, his leg twisted unnaturally beneath him. 500 soldiers froze, eyes wide, unable to process what they had just seen. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Emily stood tall, her chest rising and falling, her fists clenched, every muscle trembling not with fear, but with the adrenaline of survival. She hadn't planned to do it. She hadn't wanted it. But when a man uses violence to strip you of your dignity, sometimes you have no choice but to fight back. And in that instant, she realized she hadn't just defended herself. She had torn down a wall that had been holding back every woman in uniform who came after her. The colonel groaned. On the ground, clutching his leg, his authority shattered as much as the bone inside him. But Emily didn't move to gloat. She didn't sneer or smirk. She stood, her voice steady as she said only one thing. Respect is earned, not forced. Her words rippled through the ranks like thunder, reaching every soldier's heart named Kimijin's. Heat away the colonel's fear never could. Some tried to hide their grins, others stood frozen in awe, but all of them knew they had just witnessed something history would not forget. That day, Emily faced the weight of the aftermath. The military doesn't look kindly on insubordination, even when it's self-defense. She was dragged before a board of inquiry, her career hanging in the balance. The colonel's allies wanted her punished, stripped of her rank, disgraced. But the truth was, 500 men had seen what happened. 500 men had witnessed not a soldier breaking discipline, but a human being standing against humiliation. And for the first time in her career, Emily wasn't standing alone. Soldiers she had never spoken to before came forward, testifying in her defense, their voices trembling with a mix of admiration and guilt for having stood silent for so long. The inquiry stretched for weeks. Emily's nights were sleepless. Her days filled with doubt. She wondered if it was worth it, if all her years of sacrifice were about to end in shame. But every time she closed her eyes, she remembered the look in the eyes of the younger recruits, the ones who had seen her defy the colonel. They had seen that courage wasn't about size or gender, but about refusing to bow to injustice. And she knew that even if she lost her career, she had won something far greater. When the verdict finally came, the room held its breath. The board declared the act as self-defense under provocation, and Emily was cleared of wrongdoing. The colonel, however, was quietly retired, his career ending not with honor, but with the bitter taste of his own arrogance. Emily walked out of that room not as a victim, not as a survivor, but as a symbol. Soldiers saluted her in the hallways, some with pride, some with shame, but all with respect. She had done what no one else had dared. Years later, when new recruits entered the academy, her story was whispered like legend. Some called it rebellion, others called it justice. But for the women who came after her, it was something far more. It was proof. Proof that courage has no gender. Proof that dignity is worth fighting for. Proof that sometimes, in the face of cruelty, the bravest thing you can do is stand your ground. And Emily? She carried the memory quietly, never bragging, never reliving the moment with pride. Because for her, it wasn't about breaking a man's leg. It was about breaking the cycle of silence, the one that allowed humiliation to thrive unchecked. She didn't see herself as a hero. She only saw herself as a soldier who refused to bow. And maybe that's what made her one. Now, I'll leave you with this question. What would you do if standing up for yourself meant risking everything you've ever worked for? Because sometimes the most dangerous battles aren't fought with guns and bombs, but with dignity, courage, and the strength to say no more. Rehook for the ending. And now, I'll leave you with this question. What would you do if standing up for yourself meant risking everything you've ever worked for? Because sometimes the most dangerous battles aren't fought with guns and bombs, but with dignity, courage, and the strength to say no more.